The forbidden technique of Thoth that makes your soul remember who you really are. You've never heard this before, and it's not by accident. There exists a technique so powerful that when applied, it makes your soul instantly remember who you truly are. It's not theory, it's not an empty ritual. It works. And because it works, it was hidden from the world for centuries. Because those who control this world know a person who remembers who they are cannot be manipulated. They no longer need fear or guilt or approval. They live free. And that is the greatest threat to those who want to keep you trapped. But now the time has come. In the next minutes, you will understand why this technique was called forbidden. And more than that, you will feel how it begins to awaken inside you. But pay attention, do not skip anything. Because if you miss even one part of what I reveal now, you could spend your whole life without remembering who you really are. And everything begins now. What is hidden within you will be revealed when you silence the turmoil of the mind and listen to the voice of your true being. When you begin to study ancient civilizations, something strange happens. People separated by oceans, who never exchanged letters, never shared travelers, began to say the same things about the soul, the universe, and the meaning of life. They had no internet, no airplanes, no simultaneous translators, and yet in distant temples, in different languages, they repeated the same warning. Human beings have forgotten who they truly are. In ancient Egypt, Thoth spoke of a vibrational fall, not a physical fall, but a lowering of the soul's frequency as it entered the body, as if pure light had been covered by a dense layer difficult to pierce. Thoth did not see the body as an enemy, but as a challenge. He said that at birth the soul plunges into the world of forms and forgets its invisible origin. And the worst part was not forgetting completely, but still feeling deep inside that something was missing. Like a distant echo you cannot trace, but you know it's there. In ancient India, the rishis called this forgetting smara. They taught that the soul does not need to learn anything new, because everything is already within. What we need is to remember. And to remember the path is not through books or intellectual debates, but through inner practices. Silence, meditation, vibration, and a state of consciousness where the ego loses its grip and essence returns. In Greece, the Orphics saw the soul as a prisoner of the body. But listen carefully. They did not speak with pessimism, nor as those who reject life. It was an invitation to awaken. They believed the body was temporary, and true freedom came when the soul recognized its immortal nature. Their rituals used chants, breathing, and altered states of perception, so that even in life, a person could experience that sacred remembrance. These traditions did not copy each other. They were different manifestations of the same truth. A truth that crosses cultures and ages, a truth that has no owner, no religion, no flag. It is an ancestral memory, living in the human heart since the beginning. But notice something curious. In none of these places was the technique written in an accessible manual. There were no sacred books describing step by step for anyone to read, because they knew this kind of knowledge cannot be handed to just anyone without preparation. That is why the teachings were transmitted orally, from master to disciple, in silence within temples, far from the eyes of the common crowd. Whoever wished to learn truly had to prepare. They had to search. The danger was not in the technique itself, but in what could happen if it was used by someone not ready to cross their own ego. These peoples guarded this wisdom as one guards a sacred fire. They did not want to control knowledge. They wanted to protect those not yet prepared to face it, because remembering who you really are is not comfortable. It changes everything. It takes away emotional crutches, shatters limiting beliefs, destroys the mental structures that gave you safety. And yet, despite being protected, this wisdom never ceased to exist. It crossed centuries disguised as myths, symbols, and stories that only a few knew how to interpret. It is there, in Egyptian hieroglyphs, in the Vedic scriptures, in Greek theater, in shamanic tales, and even today, in the modern world, it remains alive, alive in those who listen, not only with their ears, but with the heart. But now a question arises, one that cannot be ignored. What was happening inside those temples? What kind of ritual unfolded in those silent, dark chambers? Hidden from the eyes of the world. How could someone pierce the veil of illusion and remember their own soul? What happened inside was so powerful, so transformative, that many were never the same after going through it. Prostitutely, what we will begin to reveal now, the first barrier, breaking the false self, without fear. Roses were never designed to impress audiences or feed blind beliefs. They were experiences of irreversible transformation. When someone crossed the silent doors of an Egyptian temple, an Orphic sanctuary, or a Vedic school, they were not just participating in a ritual. They were about to die without dying. But pay attention. It was not physical death. It was something far more subtle and far more terrifying for those still trapped in the ego. They called it symbolic death. Beef, a process in which a person was led into such a deep state of rest that their consciousness disconnected from the body for a few hours. Boolean, and in that state, the initiate was guided, not by words, but by vibrations and symbols, guided through an invisible world most people don't even know exists. On the other side of the veil, there were no teachers to hand out prepared answers. There was only what the soul already knew, but had forgotten. Because that was the secret they guarded at all costs. No one teaches you who you are. You remember it. You have always known, with the voice of the ego, with its fears, its ambitions, its guilt, screams so loudly out here that you can no longer hear what has always been silent in there. During those hours of passage, the initiate received no new external knowledge. On the contrary, everything experienced was a return. They recognized symbols they had never studied. They felt truths they had never read in books. It was like waking up from a long, heavy dream and suddenly remembering who they had always been before all of this began. And here is where the true power of the ritual lived. It was not an intellectual experience. It was not meant to satisfy curiosity or add another theory. It was a shock of spiritual reality, because once you see what lies beyond the veil, you cannot pretend you never saw it. The illusion of separation, of fear, of control, loses its meaning. You return to the body, but you are never the same. Still, the path was not always easy. Crossing the veil required courage. Not everyone could do it. Some, when faced with the vastness of what they truly were, felt fear. The ego, realizing it was not the center of everything, resisted. Ria's own cases, the initiate could not let go, remaining trapped between two worlds, unable to fully return to illusion, but not yet ready to dwell in the truth of the soul. And Thoth spoke of this clearly. He warned the greatest danger in walking this path was attempting it without inner preparation. Because the ego, when confronted with truth, can distort the experience and twist it into fuel for greater spiritual vanity. This is why not all who crossed returned transformed. Some returned confused, frightened, fragmented, because they were not ready to let die what they thought they were. And here lies the most delicate point of this teaching. Many seek spiritual techniques hoping to become more powerful, more wise, more special. But true initiation does not make you more important. It makes you more authentic. And being authentic means leaving behind everything false, everything built to please others, to protect yourself from fear, or to feel superior. Ration Sapant, that is the death that does not kill, the death of the character, the death of the role you have played for so long without realizing it. But Thoth also said, for those who cross this process with sincerity and courage, what awaited on the other side was not destruction, but rebirth, the beginning of a new life, where you no longer lean on the lies the world told about you. You simply are, simple, silent, complete, as you always were, but had forgotten. Still, not all returned the same way. Some crossed over, but could not bring into daily life what they had seen. They remained caught in a kind of inner limbo, knowing the truth, but unable to live it fully. And it was about this risk that Thoth warned again and again, because remembering who you are is only the beginning. Meetings with real challenge is to live from that truth. And if that journey was so dangerous, so deep, so transformative, what did Thoth teach to protect his disciples from that risk? What preparation was required before launching into that invisible voyage? That is exactly what we now begin to reveal. It is useless to cross the invisible veil if the one walking still carries the weight of the false self. And what Thoth taught was direct, without detours. The first barrier is not outside, it is inside. And it is not a demon, nor a curse, nor an external enemy. It is the illusory identity, that voice repeating every day, who you think you are, but which is nothing more than a bundle of beliefs, fears, and expectations placed there since birth. That identity is not who you truly are. It is a character, a role you accepted without realizing, just to fit into the world around you. Since childhood you heard stories about who you should be. You are too sensitive. You're not capable. You must be strong. You must be the best. And without noticing, you wore those words as if they were yours. But none of them came from your soul. They came from the fear of others, from the limitations they carried and passed on to you. Thoth called this the invisible mental prison, not because you see chains, but because you don't even notice you are trapped. You think those ideas are yours, when in truth they are programs you accepted without questioning. And here is where the practice truly begins. It is useless to search for higher worlds while your inner world is loaded with illusions. To begin breaking that barrier, Thoth taught something simple yet profoundly transformative, an exercise you can do right now in this very moment. Observe a thought that arises in your mind. Any thought, maybe a fear, a doubt, a worry. Now pause and ask yourself, is this thought really mine? Or did someone place it in me? You will notice that most of the thoughts that control you every day were not created by you. They were inherited, copied, absorbed from the environment, from family, from society. And the strangest thing, you didn't even notice when it happened. But now that you see it, you can no longer pretend you haven't. This simple observation creates a crack in the false self. Because when you stop automatically believing everything you think, you begin to see the space between who you really are and the thoughts you have. And it is in that space where freedom begins. But pay attention. This process is not comfortable because the false self will fight to survive. It will try to convince you that letting go of those beliefs is dangerous, that you will lose your identity, that you will feel lost, that you will be vulnerable. And for a while, you may indeed feel that way. Because it is like removing a mask you have worn your entire life. At first, the naked face seems strange, but little by little, truth begins to breathe again. That is the first step of the forbidden technique. Before seeking mystical experiences, you must clear the inner ground, because it is useless to plant seeds of truth in a soil full of lies. The ego will try to distort any revelation, bending it to serve its own interests. It will turn freedom into spiritual pride. It will turn perception into vanity. It will turn knowledge into competition, a race over who knows more. This is why Thoth was clear. First cleanse, see the false with clarity. Only then advance. And when you begin to release those characters, something curious happens. Silences that once felt terrifying begin to feel comforting. Moments without answers turn into spaces of peace. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone, not even to yourself, because for the first time, you are beginning to be who you truly are, without hiding behind masks. But what comes after that initial cleansing is not emptiness. It is precisely there that something deeper begins to emerge. Something that has been asleep, your birth. A part of you that never forgot who you are. A presence that has always been observing, waiting for you to finally look inward. And it is exactly this part that we now begin to reveal. There exists a sound within you that cannot be spoken, only felt. When that truest part of you begins to surface, something shifts in the way you perceive the world. It is as if a veil falls from your eyes. But the strangest thing is this: it is not your eyes that see. Thoth called this perception the single eye. It was not the physical eye, nor logical reasoning, nor even emotions. It was something that sees without needing to look, that knows without needing to think. A direct perception, raw, silent, and at the same time, more real than any words could ever describe. That perception has always been there, but it was dimmed by mental noise, by the voices of others, by the beliefs you were taught to believe. Since childhood, you were told that to understand life, you must analyze, compare, calculate, judge. But truth is not revealed by comparison. It is revealed by presence. And the single eye does not compare anything. It simply sees. To see, in the spiritual sense, is not to look outward. It is to perceive without filter. It is to sense reality before the mind distorts it, trying to explain. The mind wants to name things, to build stories, to divide into right and wrong, beautiful and ugly, good and bad. But the single eye has no hurry, only presence. It sees things as they are without labels, and for that reason, it touches a dimension most people have lost, a dimension where everything is already complete, needing nothing more. Now, to begin to feel this, you don't need years of study or long retreats. What Thoth taught was simple, just a single instant of true silence. Not the silence where you wait for something to happen, but the silence where you expect nothing. A pure space, effortless. Let's do this together now. Close your eyes for 10 seconds. Take a deep breath. Do not try to feel anything special. Do not expect any magical answer. Simply remain in silence, totally present. Done. You can open your eyes. Maybe you felt something different. Maybe you didn't. But something important happened, even if your mind did not notice. For the first time in a long while, you gave space for pure perception to occur. And even if it was just for a few seconds, it already began to weaken the noise that distracts you every day. This is how the single eye awakens, not with explanations, but with conscious silence, not with theories, but with presence. And the more you practice, the more you realize that life has another layer behind what the physical eyes show. A layer where everything vibrates in silent unity. But pay close attention. The direct perception is only the beginning. It shows you there is something beyond the mind, beyond emotions. Yet it is not the deepest frequency of your soul. Because even if you perceive reality without filters, something is still missing, something that truly defines who you are. Thoth said this was the true sound of the soul, and almost no one has ever touched it. It cannot be explained with words. It cannot be grasped with logic. It can only be felt when everything else falls silent. And from that silence, something deeper begins to emerge. Because to perceive the world without filters is already a great step. But Thoth said there exists something even more intimate, more essential, more yours than any perception or thought. It is the unique vibration of your soul, a sound never spoken aloud, yet resonating within you since the beginning of your existence. The ancients called it the invisible name. It is not a name like John or Mary or any word invented by men. It is a frequency, a vibrational state, and when it is touched, everything within you recognizes who you have always been. That invisible name cannot be taught. No one can tell you what it is, because it is not information. It is a silent sound, a calling that does not enter through the ears, but vibrates in the spiritual heart. In the Hermetic tradition, Thoth taught that this name was never discovered by reading books, memorizing formulas, or performing external rituals. It was accessed through vibrational resonance. And what does that mean? It means that when you align within, when the mind falls silent and the heart opens, that vibration begins to resonate spontaneously. It has always been there. But the noise of the mind and the masks of the ego silenced its sound. And here's something curious. Even without knowing it consciously, you have already experienced that vibration in very specific moments of your life. Do you know that rare instant when everything seems to align, when you feel a peace that does not come from any external reason, or that strong intuition that rises from nowhere, and you simply know what to do, without doubt, without anxiety? Those are echoes of your invisible name vibrating within you. It is as if, for a brief moment, the noise of the mind faded, and that silent frequency could be heard in the depths of your awareness. But here comes an important revelation. That vibration does not need words. Any attempt to place it in concepts limits what it really is. It cannot be described. It can only be felt. And the more you try to mentalize it, the less you perceive it. Because it does not belong to the mind. It belongs to essence. Thoth said, this vibration is your true center. Embarrassment, it is the point where you stop being a sum of thoughts and emotions and become pure existence. You are not a character. You are not a role. You are not a story. You are simply you, naked, silent, complete, without needing to prove anything, without needing to conquer anything, only to be. And when that vibration becomes clear, something powerful happens. Deep in your chest, you feel a silent certainty. It is not arrogance. It is not spiritual pride. It is an unshakable peace that does not depend on external circumstances. Mixin is as if you were saying, I know who I am, and I do not need the world to confirm it. But here is a detail that many ignore. When that inner light begins to shine, It does not illuminate only what is beautiful. It illuminates everything, even what was hidden beneath the surface. Wounds, ancient fears, parts of you that you tried to bury for years, because true light does not choose what to reveal. It shows everything that stands in the way of your freedom. And this is where many people become afraid, because when that frequency awakens, what was hidden in the dark also rises to the surface, and it is not always beautiful. To remember who you are also means to remember who tried to hide it. Remembering who you are is not only about remembering your light. Your pure divine essence also forces you to face everything you built to survive in this world. All the layers you created to protect yourself from pain, from rejection, from fear. Thoth called this the purification of the soul. But understand, this was never a punishment, not a spiritual condemnation. It was a natural process, like water cleansing dirt when it finds the source. When you begin to remember, old traumas rise to the surface, not to wound you again, but to finally be healed. Fears you carried without knowing their origin begin to reveal their true source. Lies you repeated all your life. I am not enough. I must please everyone. I must protect myself at all costs. They lose all meaning when you see who you truly are. It is as if the light of your essence illuminates the hidden corners within. And at first, this can feel uncomfortable, because seeing truth hurts. But it is that very pain that frees you, the pain of removing the mask, the pain of realizing you live trapped in beliefs that were never yours, the pain of noticing you had been running from yourself for far too long. Yet Thoth made this clear: suffering only continues when you resist. When you accept what rises, it transforms into healing. That is true purification. It is not about pushing away what is bad. It is about integrating what was denied. It is about bringing into the light everything you tried to hide from yourself. And at that point, something happens that changes everything. The soul begins to take control for the very first time. The mind, which always dictated the rules, loses ground. The ego, which ruled your steps with fear and desire, falls silent. And in that silence, true consciousness emerges. But this is where the real test begins, because remembering who you are is only the beginning. Now, you must keep walking. You cannot stop halfway, for the mind will try to regain control. It will try to pull you back into the comfort zone, into old habits, into stories you already know. But if you give in, you return to forgetting, and the soul no longer wants to sleep. It wants to live. And when the soul takes the lead, something changes in your state of perception. It is no longer the mind analyzing everything, trying to control what happens. Now consciousness observes without interfering. You enter what Thoth called the waking trance, a state where you are fully present, yet distant enough not to be devoured by the chaos around you. In this conscious trance, time seems to slow down. You feel each moment with greater depth. Emotions still exist, but they no longer dominate you. They move through you, and you decide what to do with them. Intuitions arise effortlessly. Decisions become clearer. Situations that once pulled you out of center now seem small compared to the vastness of your being. It is like standing in the middle of a storm, yet watching it all from within a silence that cannot be shaken. The world keeps spinning. People keep rushing. The noise continues outside, but inside, there is peace. Not because the world has changed, but because you have changed the way you see the world. This is the greatest secret: to live awake while the world sleeps. Living awake in silence is simple. Living awake in the middle of sleeping people, in chaotic situations, that is the real challenge. And Thoth made this very clear. The true alchemist does not isolate from the world. He walks among the crowd, but his vibration does not mix with the external noise. He does not reject daily life. He transforms daily life with his conscious presence. And how does this happen in practice? Not by living as a monk on a mountaintop, but by breathing deeply in chaotic traffic, by keeping inner silence while empty conversations unfold around you, by choosing what you consume with your eyes, your ears, your heart. Because everything you allow in shapes the vibration you maintain. Thoth taught simple yet powerful practices. Active silence, for example. It is not a passive silence where you isolate yourself and run from the world. It is a silence where, even in the middle of daily tasks, you keep a part of yourself awake, observing without judgment. It is a state where you do not get lost in the rush, but maintain an inner point of balance. Another practice was conscious choice. Most people react automatically to everything that happens. They do not choose what to think, what to feel, or how to act. They only follow patterns conditioned throughout life. But the vibrational alchemist chooses. He decides what to feed in his mind, in his words, in his actions. And finally, vigilance over what enters the mind. Because the mind is like a garden. If you don't care for it, weeds will grow everywhere. Empty information, collective fears, negative thoughts you absorb without even noticing. And by the time you notice, you already feel tired, anxious, lost. That is why filtering what you consume is essential. It is not about living alienated. It is about living conscious. And when these practices become natural, something extraordinary happens. The remembrance no longer fades. It stops being a passing state and becomes the foundation of your existence. It is no longer a spiritual peak, that happens once in a while. It becomes a constant state of presence. The soul ceases to be a visitor and becomes a dwelling. And it is precisely at this point that the return takes place. Not a return to the past, but a return to the source, a place with no physical location, yet closer than any external place. It is a state where seeking no longer exists, because you realize that what you searched for all your life was already inside you. It always was. And here something happens that transforms everything. You realize you no longer need to chase others' approval. You no longer need to seek answers outside. You no longer need to beg for love, because you realize you already are all of that. The source of peace, of love, of wisdom is within. And everything you looked for outside was only a reflection of what your soul always knew. If you have arrived here, it is because something inside you has already begun to remember. And I want to know who is vibrating in this frequency. Leave it here in the comments. I remembered who I am. This is how we spread this energy. This is how we show there are more souls awakening in the middle of this sleeping world. Roche Sauvage doesn't speak to everyone, only to those who feel